The conference room was cold to cold, kind of cold that makes your skin remember you don't belong. Dr. Amira Calloway stood alone at the podium, her palms pressed flat against the edge. The projection behind her displayed a slide titled, Neuro Postmortem Cognition, The Threshold of Death. She took a deep breath, then spoke. When the human brain is dying, it does not go quietly. Neural oscillations spike. Memory networks surge. It's not fading, it's fighting. My research proposes a minimally invasive Coffin camera paired with a neuroimaging head cap, capable of capturing the final seconds of brain activity in situ. This could redefine everything we think we know about death. Silence, the sixth board. Members older, mostly white, mostly men looked like statues carved from skepticism. One, Dean Richards, adjusted his glasses and gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thank you, Dr. Calloway. It's certainly an imaginative proposal, though one might ask if this veers into philosophy rather than science. Laughter. Thin, controlled, dismissive. Amira swallowed. With respect, I've published on this subject in Neuroscience Today and presented preliminary results from our rodent models. This is neuroscience. Another member, a woman in a Navy suit, interjected. It's very provocative. Why the coffin? Isn't that a little theatrical? It's not for theatrics, Amira replied carefully. It's for realism. Death doesn't happen in labs, it happens in bedrooms, ambulances, morgues. The coffin provides a controlled but authentic end-of-life setting. It's about integrity and data collection. Dean Richards nodded, feigning thoughtfulness. Still, I wonder if we're chasing ghosts. Resources are limited, Dr. Calloway. Perhaps your expertise could be directed toward more applicable avenues? Heard what he didn't say? Heard it in the hesitation before applicable? In the way he leaned back, confident she wouldn't push. Heard it in every review that called her ambitious but lacking focus. She knew this game, knew how many brilliant black women were drowned in it. Amira closed her laptop. Then I'll apply for external funding. Independent oversight. Of course, best of luck. Back in her lab, she paced in silence. The wall still held her research posters. Her whiteboard still bore half-yearst equations. Quiet, today it all felt like borrowed space. Like any moment, someone would walk in and remind her none of this really belonged to her. She sat at her desk and opened a leather-bound notebook. It was her mother's once, now filled with notes and sketches. On the final page she wrote, "If they won't let me open the door, I'll build one, and open it from the inside." She stared at the photo tacked above her monitor in a graduation robe, her mother's hands on her shoulders, proud. Tired eyes. Amira reached into her desk drawer, pulled out the mock prototype of the coffin cam, shell, and turned it over in her hands. Cold metal, smooth waiting. Outside, night fell over the university. Inside, she was already preparing for death. Not hers, not yet, but someone's. And when it came, the camera would be watching. The next morning, Amira arrived at the lab early, coffee in hand, hoodie pulled low over her head. She preferred the silence before the rest of the building came alive, the machines still sleeping, the hallways hollow. This was the only hour she could breathe without apology. She pressed her badge to the scanner. Red light. Denied again. The security guard rounded the corner, already reaching for his walkie. "Excuse me?" he barked. "You can't be back here." Amira kept her tone even. "I'm Dr. Calloway. This is my lab." He paused, scanning her up and down, as if her genes and skin made her unfit for her own title. Then sheepishly, "Right. Sorry. System must not be updated." It had been 3 years. She stepped inside. Julia was already at the bench, lab coat crisp, typing rapidly. "Morning." She chirped. "I went ahead and sent the data summary from yesterday's trials to Dean Richards. I put your name second, like we discussed." Amira froze mid-step. Second, Julia blinked. "Well, yeah," he said, "it looked more cohesive." With him listed first, since he helped approve the methodology. He made a few edits, too. "He didn't help," Amira said, low. "And you don't edit someone else's analysis without permission." Julia looked wounded, like a dog gently scolded. "I was just trying to help." Amira nodded stiffly, biting the words down before they rose. Don't make it a scene. Don't be the angry black woman. Later that afternoon, while heading to the cafeteria, a young custodian held the door open and smiled politely. "Thanks for your work," he said. She didn't correct him, didn't say. Not the janitor didn't say. "I hold a PhD in neurobiophysics from MIT. She just smiled back and kept walking. Each cut was small. Each one bled just enough. Back in the lab, Amira opened her journal, the one she'd used since undergrad. She flipped past equations and sketches, diagrams, and hypotheses. She stopped at a blank page and started to write not with logic, but with fire. There's a kind of death they never name. The slow disintegration of dignity, when your ideas are credited to someone else's mouth, when your badge gets flagged. But your white assistant breezes through. When you become too black to trust, too quiet to notice, too loud to tolerate. They don't kill you. They erode you. I am dying in pieces. Paper cuts to the soul. She underlined the last sentence 3 times. Amira closed the journal gently, as if sealing something sacred. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dean Richards. "Interesting. Developments in your proposal. Would love to chat about redirecting your talents toward a mentorship initiative we're launching." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned to the prototype coffin in the corner, the one they kept covered in sterile cloth. She pulled the cloth back and ran her fingers along its edges. What if death is the only place they can't follow? "Me," she whispered. Julia re-entered the lab, breezing past. "Oh hey, just so you know, Dr. Whitehall dropped by earlier. He said he wants to be kept in the loop about your little camera thing. I told him you'd be thrilled." Amira said nothing. She watched the overhead lights reflect off the curve of the coffin shell. The way the metal caught light but gave nothing back. Let them underestimate her. Let them keep misnaming her brilliance, mistaking her silence for consent. She was already building her answer. One bolt, one camera, one truth at a time. And soon, she would show them what death really looked like. The camera's red light blinked, steadily and blinking. Emotional, patient. Dr. Amira Calloway stared at it as if it might blink back. They had secured their first cadaver, an anonymous donor. Male, late 60s, cause of death, heart failure. The ethics paperwork had taken weeks, the approval longer. But now, the prototype coffin stood ready in the imaging chamber part morgue. Part machine, Keon Price, her lead tech engineer, adjusted the overhead rig. His presence was quiet but grounding. Where others spoke over her, Keon listened. Others questioned her vision. Keon had simply asked, "When do we start?" "Video calibration complete," he said. EEG net applied. "All sensors reading baseline." Amira nodded. "Initiate recording." The body lay still, wrapped in a surgical sheet. The camera, embedded just above the headrest, angled downward and blinking. We would capture 12 hours of post-mortem data. The brain might be dead, but the echoes remained. At hour 3, Amira sat alone, reviewing the initial data stream. Waves, silence, then a flicker. She paused, rewound. There it was, a blurno, presence barely perceptible in the frames. Corner, humanoid, but without definition, as if someone had stepped into the coffin for just a second and vanished. And just before it disappeared, the audio, though barely above noise, floor-spiked. A whisper, indecipherable, garbled, but undeniably there. She played it again. Flicker, shadow, whisper. She stared at the monitor. Heart tight against her ribs. It felt like more than a glitch. More than interference, it felt. Deliberate, Keon returned, sipping a lukewarm soda. "How's the first run look?" Mira didn't turn. "Come listen to this." He leaned over, brow furrowed as she played the clip. Silence, flicker, whisper. Keon exhaled sharply. "That's not compression noise." "No," he zoomed in. The figure had no heat signature. No data spike. Could be refraction from the lens? Ambient dust? Dust doesn't whisper. He looked at her then, eyes dark and steady. "I think it's, spiritual?" Amira hesitated, then shook her head. "I think trauma doesn't die with The body, I think it records itself. Like a scar, burned into matter. Keon didn't laugh, didn't mock, just nodded once, slow. Then maybe we just caught a scar healing. That night, Amira sat alone with the footage, frame by frame. The figure never became clearer, but the whisper began to haunt her, not its sound, but its silence. Like something trying to be remembered. She opened her journal again. What if the dead aren't silent because they're gone? What if they're silent because no one listens anymore? At midnight, she uploaded the file to an isolated drive, encrypted it, and labeled it Run 01, The Presence. When she turned off the lights, the coffin camera still glowed faint red in the dark, unblinking, waiting, recording. By the fifth cadaver, shadows weren't just flickers anymore, they were stories. Amira sat rigid in her chair, eyes locked to the screen. The latest recording was nearly completed hours of post-mortem footage. For the first 4, everything was quiet, predictable. Then the temperature dropped just 2 degrees, but enough for the sensors to notice. At hour 6, the feed changed, not in resolution or lighting, but in atmosphere. The stillness of the coffin became suffocating. The corners of the frame dimmed unnaturally. Then movement. A flash, not a shadow. A rope, hung loosely from a tree branch that hadn't existed in the room. Behind it, soil blood dark. A crowd stood around someone whose face she couldn't see, but whose skin she knew. Brown, bruised, black. She stopped the footage. Her pulse skidded, she ran it back. This time, another flash accompanied it. The edge of a branding iron. The inside of a cramped ship hold, rows of chained ankles. A hand reaching out through bars, trembling, and a voice female, aged southern. Don't forget us, she gasped. Her chair rolled back on instinct. The room felt like it was closing in. She stood, paced, gripped the counter like it might stop her from falling. Am I losing it? She whispered to no one. An hour later, Keon walked in, hoodie, pulled up, earbuds dangling. She gestured him over without a word. Her hand was shaking. You need to see this. Together, they replayed the section. He said nothing for a long time. Then, ... That's not a glitch. No, she said, voice cracking. What do you think it is? Mira exhaled, barely audible. I think the dead are remembering. He didn't speak for several minutes, just sat with it, the images, the silence that followed them. The weight Khan leaned forward, voice low. You think death courts pain. I think pain stains reality. Leaves a trace. Maybe, just maybe. The veil's thinner than we thought. They played another clip from the second subject. This time, a black woman's body, early 40s. As the camera rolled, Amira noticed a figure in the far left of the frame. This one didn't flicker. She stood still, solid, barefoot, wearing a faded cotton dress, hands folded at her waist. She looked ... serene. Who's that? Keon asked. Amira leaned closer. The woman stared directly into the lens. Not menacing, not sad, present, as if she had always been waiting. Suddenly the screen glitched, then cut to static. They rewound, but the image was gone. Amira scribbled in her journal. Her name is Lila. I don't know how I know, but I do. What? Keon looked. Over her shoulder, she said something, before the static. You heard it? He nodded. I remember you. They backed up the audio, isolated the channel, adjusted the levels. No waveform registered the words, but they had both heard them. Then it's not a hallucination, she whispered. It's history. Looked at the coffin again, not just as a vessel of death, but a prism, a recorder, a mirror. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, as if the world itself were shifting. Inside, Amira stared at the empty coffin, knowing it was anything but empty. You said trauma leaves a trace, Keon said, voice soft. What if this is it talking? Back. Amira didn't respond. Her eyes were wet, not with fear, but with recognition. The presentation room smelled like old carpet and distrust. Amira stood in front of the ethics committee, her laptop open, the footage queued. Her heart beat steady, but low in her gut was a hum like thunder before a storm. She clicked play. The video rolled. Static. Silence. Then the rope. The whispers. The image of the barefoot woman, Lila, her eyes locked on the lens. The time stamp blinked softly in the corner, confirming its unedited authenticity. When the video ended, no one moved. No one spoke. Dr. Whitehall, ethics chair, cleared. His throat. The practiced move. Well, he said, folding his hands like he was preparing to give a eulogy. That was certainly ... dramatic. It's not drama, Amira replied evenly. It's data. Whitehall raised a brow. Data that conveniently aligns with certain socio-political narratives. Tell me, Dr. Calloway, do you really expect this board to believe the dead are transmitting messages of racial trauma through your camera? I expect you to examine the evidence. Dean Richards, seated near the back, gave a condescending chuckle. Or did you, perhaps, insert these images yourself, to heighten the impact? Amira's face didn't flinch, but something inside her cracked. No, she said. What you're seeing is unaltered. If you're uncomfortable with the implications, that doesn't make it untrue. Whitehall leaned forward. Intent matters, Doctor. You're on university equipment funded by institutional grants. And this, he gestured to the paused image of Leela. This is bordering on activism disguised as research. Truth is not activism, she said, louder now. This is evidence that death doesn't erase oppression, it archives it. A pause. Then, your funding is suspended pending review. Amira stared at them. On what grounds? Whitehall smiled. We're concerned about objectivity. About your ability to separate personal history from scientific rigor. The words struck like a slap. Personal history, not data, not evidence, just her blackness, again being labeled bias. I won't retract my findings. Whitehall stood. Then you are relieved from the project, effective immediately. Amira's breath caught, but she didn't lower her eyes. Keon waited outside the meeting room, his back against the wall. When she stepped out, his expression said he already knew. They cut you, didn't they? They didn't even pretend to hide it. Later that night, her inbox exploded. A university press release. Dr. Amira Calloway, placed on administrative hiatus amid questions of research integrity. The comment threads swarmed. Another race-baiting academic. Coffin cameras. Sounds like performance art. Bet she doctored it herself. But there were other comments too. I saw that footage. I felt it. Why are they so afraid of what she found? Kean texted her one word. Stand. Amira closed her laptop slowly. The institution was trying to bury her, but she had learned from the dead. And they didn't stay buried. They took her lab, so she built another. The prototype. Coffin now lived in her apartment, wedged awkwardly between the couch and dining table. Wires coiling like roots across the floor. Rent be damned, it was quieter. Here, no board, no cameras, just her Keon's code base and the dead. She reassembled everything from scratch, refusing to let silence be her obedience. The first night back, she connected the new system and hit record. The screen blinked to life, waiting. There was no body this time, just the camera inside the shell, but the silence it captured wasn't empty. It was heavy. An hour in, frame shimmered. First faint, then solid, a darkened cotton field under. A sweltering sun, rows of bodies bent over the soil. Whispers layered the air. Not English, something older. Grief spoken in rhythm. Amira's breath hitched. She scribbled in her journal. The coffin doesn't need death. It needs memory. The next session was stronger. This time the feed swelled with images like waves unannounced, uninvited. Hospital corridor with peeling green walls. A black woman strapped to a gurney, her eyes wide as white coats stood around her, debating pain thresholds. Her scream was soundless, but the agony was in the frame itself. It cut again. This time, a church burning. Then, A girl. Amira recognized the girl instantly. Herself. 7 years old. Sitting on a classroom floor as a teacher crouched low and whispered, "Try to talk softer, sweetie. And maybe don't use ain't. Colleges notice that kind of thing." Young Amira had nodded and carried that correction for decades. Now, adult Amira watched herself from the corner of the coffin, cam frame small, confused, ashamed. The memory shouldn't have existed in any video. It lived only in her. She shut the laptop, breathing hard. She heard her mother's voice then, not through speakers. Not from the cam, but somewhere inside. "You don't have to earn your humanity, baby. It's already yours." The voice cracked, like it carried years of swallowing rage. She remembered the day her mother told her to straighten her hair before a scholarship interview. Not because it looked nice, but because it looked safe. Less loud, less black. She opened the laptop again. The coffin camera feed pulsed not with images now, but colors. Flickers of light, gold, deep red, indigo. As if it were speaking in frequency, not form. Amira typed into her notes, "This is not surveillance. This is testimony." And the coffin, it wasn't just a vessel, it was a witness box. She ran a diagnostics check, no errors. The camera was functioning perfectly. This was no malfunction. It was a message, an inheritance. Keon called her late that night. "I don't think the board was ever scared of ghosts," he said. "I think they were scared of what the dead might reveal." Amira stared at the screen. Lila stood there again, silent, present, unflinching. "Let them try to erase us," Amira whispered. "We remember ourselves." And for the first time, the coffin seemed to listen. The footage was never meant to go public, but silence was becoming its own kind of violence. Keon had watched Amira carry the weight for weeks, haunted eyes, trembling fingers, a woman slowly becoming an archive of pain. He knew what she wouldn't say. This was too big for just the two of them, so he called someone who still believed in truth, Layla. Saad wasn't just any journalist. She was a scalpel in a world of blunt instruments. Her pieces on systemic racism had burned through the noise, earning her threats and accolades in equal measure. When Keon emailed her a secure link titled "The Coffin Files," she responded in under an hour. They met in a quiet cafe in South LA, kind where every barista knows your name and every table hears your business. Layla listened as Keon laid it all at Tamra's research, the board's backlash, the recordings. "Lila, I want you to publish it," Keon said, sliding over a drive. "All of it." Layla stared at him. "And Dr. Calloway?" "She doesn't know. Not yet." Right. The video went live under the headline, "The Coffin Speaks." What one scientist found could change how we DNA'd, how we remember it. Spread like wildfire. Within hours, #coffin footage was trending. Millions watched the clips. The lynching tree, the hospital gurney, the burning church, the whispered "Don't forget us." Some viewers wept. Others dismissed it as doctored. Memes appeared. So did hate mail. Fox ran a segment calling it Afrofuturist hysteria. Conservative pundits decried it as a race-baiting hoax. But others, professors, faith leaders, descendants of the voiceless, shared their own stories. "My great-grandmother saw that burning church. She never forgot. That wasn't a ghost. That was a memory my family carries." Amira found out the way everyone else did. Her inbox detonated. She stared at the article, at her name now etched into the fire. Her face, her work, her coffin, beneath. The story Layla had written. Dr. Calloway was silenced for what she uncovered. We refused to let that silence stand. Keon showed up to her apartment an hour later, breathless. "I had to." Amira didn't yell, didn't cry. She closed the laptop and whispered, "Now they'll come for me harder." "I know," he said. "But now the world's watching." She looked out the window. The city below buzzed with headlights and sirens, oblivious and alive. Somewhere in the noise, someone was hearing the dead speak for the first time. Layla texted her, "They see you now. They can't unsee you." Amira didn't answer. She returned to the coffin and powered it on. The red light blinked, steady and sharp. This time, when the frame shimmered, she didn't flinch. The veil had lifted, and now there was no turning back. By morning, the university gates were flanked by cardboard signs and chanting voices. Dozens had gathered. By noon, it was hundreds. The crowd stretched across campus lawns. Students, elders, organizers, strangers who had only seen the footage once and couldn't sleep after. They weren't just protesting for Amira, they were demanding acknowledgement. Of every buried story the Coffin had unearthed, the administration tried to downplay it, called it unauthorized assembly, sent an email about respectful discourse, but it was too late. Pain had gone public. At the center stood Marcasa, lanky, 22-year-old sociology major with a bullhorn and fire in his throat. His grandmother had marched in Selma. His mother had survived cancer, but not her doctor's neglect. Now he stood in front of the administration building and shouted into history, "We are not afraid of ghosts. We're afraid of forgetting." Mira watched from a distance who'd pulled up, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. She hadn't planned to speak, but the chance changed. Let her speak. Let her speak. Let her speak. She stepped onto the makeshift platform, shaking slightly, but standing tall. Silence settled like dust. She looked over the crowd, eyes wide, hands clenched. Young, old, black, white, all waiting. She took a breath. "My name is Dr. Amira Calloway. I did not start this project to spark outrage. Started it to understand death. But what I found wasn't silence. It was memory." Murmurs rippled. "If the body can carry trauma," she continued, "then death records it. What you've seen isn't haunting its testimony. It's a history that has nowhere else to go. Our racism doesn't just kill it, lingers. It walks with us, breathes with us, buries itself in our bones." The crowd was stone still, listening, not just with ears, but with inheritance. "I am not a prophet. I am not a martyr. I'm a scientist. But science doesn't live in labs alone. It lives in blood, in breath, in who gets to die with dignity and who doesn't." She stepped down. Applause didn't come all at once. It rolled like thunder deep, slow, then swelling into something alive. That night, she received over 200 messages. Not from reporters, from people. "My uncle was killed by a cop in '94. Can you record that? My sister died after. Being misdiagnosed, her story should be there. Can memory survive beyond flesh?" Amira opened a new folder on her laptop. Archive of the Unforgotten. Each entry was a name, a date. A voice. Marcus messaged her privately. "Whatever you're building, I want to help," she replied. "Then help me remember them." The corner of the room. The Coffin blinked. Red dot, recording, still listening, still speaking. The lab they took from her was now the room they couldn't ignore. Stripped of sterile whiteboards and hushed academic whispers, it had been reborn. Soft. Lighting, black walls, velvet chairs, arranged in a circle. At its center stood the Coffin, open but untouchable. Framed by screens looping selected footage from the archive of the Unforgotten, the viewing room was open to the public. No admission, no pretense, just presence. On the first day, an elder woman in a church hat sat down and didn't move for hours. Her eyes glistened as Lila reappeared, her cotton dress soft and glowing beneath projected stars. When Lila whispered, the woman mouthed the words with her, communion across time. Beside her, a white teenager in a school hoodie clutched his phone like a lifeline. He watched a clip of a young black man in a jail cell, whispering prayers to no one, fading quietly. The teen wiped his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Some visitors walked out within minutes. Some sat cross-legged on the floor, transfixed. Some left letters on the seat cushions. "This is my father's story. I didn't know until I saw it. Forgive me for not asking sooner." Amira never announced herself. She moved quietly among them. No lab coat, no name tag, just a presence, watching the watchers, feeling their breath catch at the same moments hers once had. She was no longer invisible. She didn't need to be seen to be felt. Marcus stood near the entrance, greeting people with a firm nod and eyes that carried centuries. Layla returned with her camera crew this time, not to tell a story, but to witness one. She didn't film. She cried. In the far corner, a small girl sat in her mother's lap, pointing at the screen. "Who is she?" she asked, as Lila appeared once more. Her mother replied, voice trembling, "She's someone we're not allowed to forget." The room held no answers, only echoes, only memory, and no one who entered ever left quite the same. It was quiet again, not the cold quiet of dismissal or fear, but a sacred hush. Like the stillness before a hymn, Amir stood alone in the viewing room after hours. The lights were dimmed. The last visitors had gone home, their presence lingering in the warmth of worn seat cushions and the hush of tears still drying on velvet. She approached the coffin one last time, ran her fingers along its edge smooth, familiar. It no longer felt like a symbol of death, it felt like a vessel of reckoning, of stories no longer buried beneath polite denial. She sat in her usual corner chair and opened her mother's leather-bound journal, out hers. Its pages were full notes, dreams, memories, grief, but tonight she turned to a blank one. "This was never just about science," she wrote. "It was about what we bury to survive and what we must exhume to heal." She paused, then slow and deliberate, penned one final message, not to the dead, but to the living. "Your silence is not peace. Dig deeper." She closed the journal and exhaled. It's not an exhaustion. In release, beyond the doors. Children waited with their school group, back straight, eyes wide, whispering with the hushed excitement of those on the cusp of learning something real. They entered in pairs, small hands held by teachers and chaperones. They circled the coffin, watching footage curated for young minds, gentler, but not sanitized. Truth woven carefully, respectfully. Lila appeared not in chains or fire, but standing tall beside a river, speaking without words. The children didn't flinch. They leaned in, they listened, and when it ended, one boy raised his hand and asked, "Why didn't we learn this before?" No one answered. "Not right away." Amira, watching from the threshold, smiled softly. There it was. Not fear, not outrage. Awakening. As the children filed out, one turned back and waved at her. He didn't know who she was. Not yet. But one day maybe he would. And maybe that would be enough. Outside, the sun cracked through the clouds, warming the sidewalk, the street, the building's facade, and inside. The red light of the coffin blinked quietly. Still recording, still remembering, still rising.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.